The cafe tilde copyright smelled of roasted beans and warm pastries, the kind of scent that made strangers soften their voices and linger just a little longer over their drinks. Rain pattered softly against the wide glass windows, blurring the world outside into watercolor streaks of gray and gold. Inside, soft jazz played through hidden speakers, and the clinking of cups and saucers created a rhythm of its own. Alina sat at a corner table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She had arrived 15 minutes early, both out of nervousness and because the bus she took from her part of town ran infrequently. Her cheap coat, a thrift store find, still carried faint wrinkles no matter how carefully she ironed it that morning. She had done her best with her appearance: a simple braid, a touch of lip gloss, and the only dress she owned that still felt presentably, but she still felt like a misplaced piece in a puzzle that didn't belong to her. She tried not to look around too much, afraid that the other patrons could sense her discomfort. Most of them were couples or colleagues, people who ordered without hesitation, laughing as if money were no object. To them, coffee was a casual indulgence. To her, it was a luxury she hadn't been able to justify in months. She came for the free warmth, the occasional cheap pastry when she could stretch her budget, and mostly to remind herself she still existed outside of work and small rented rooms. And now, she was here for something entirely new, a blind date. Her friend Clara had insisted. "You've been working yourself to the bone, Alina. Just one evening, one chance." "He's kind, I promise." Kind. The word had been enough to sway her, though she didn't really believe it. Men weren't kind, or not in her experience. They were demanding, impatient, quick to see weakness as a burden. But Clara was stubborn, and so here she sat, heart racing, waiting for a man she had never met. The bell over the cafe tilde copyright door chimed. Alina looked up and almost forgot to breathe. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered beneath a tailored coat, his dark hair neatly styled. His presence seemed to draw attention effortlessly, not because he demanded it, but because he carried himself with a quiet authority, as if he belonged wherever he walked. She recognized him from the small picture Clara had shown, but in person he seemed even more striking. Handsome, yes, but also composed, the kind of man who looked like he never rushed for anything. He spotted her quickly, a smile curving across his face as he approached. "Alina." His voice was warm, confident, like a man used to commanding a room, yet softened for her sake. "Yes," she managed, standing halfway before awkwardly sitting again. Her cheeks warmed. He extended a hand. "Daniel." "It's a pleasure." She shook it, her own hand trembling slightly, and then he settled into the chair opposite her. For a moment, silence lingered, filled only by the background hum of the cafe tilde copyright. He smiled again, not the forced smile of someone playing a role, but the kind that reached his eyes. "I hope the rain didn't trouble you." She shook her head. "No. A broken bar. I like the rain." Something flickered in his glass, of curiosity, maybe approval. "So do I." A waiter appeared, setting menus in front of them. Alina's chest tightened. She knew she shouldn't look, but her eyes dropped anyway. "Latte a $7, cappuccino a $6.50, cold brews, seasonal blends, pastries that cost more than an entire meal at her apartment." She swallowed hard. Her weekly budget couldn't stretch to even the cheapest option. Daniel was flipping casually through the menu, relaxed, as though none of the prices mattered. Which, she realized, they probably didn't to a man like him. Clara had said he was successful, though she hadn't mentioned how much. Judging by his immaculate clothes and effortless composure, Alina guessed he was far above her world. Her hands trembled as she traced the edge of the laminated menu. She couldn't order. She couldn't fake it either. The last thing she wanted was to embarrass herself on her first date by being caught in a lie, fumbling for money she didn't have. The waiter approached, pen poised. "What can I get you both?" Her throat constricted. Panic fluttered in her chest. She could say she wasn't hungry. But then what? Sit here like a child while he drank coffee? No. She had to say something. She lifted her eyes, desperate, and before she could stop herself, the truth spilled out in a whisper. "A broken bar. I can't afford coffee." The silence that followed was deafening. She wanted to vanish, to melt into the floorboards, to run before she saw pity or irritation in his eyes. No one had ever made her feel so small as her own words just had. But then, Daniel looked up from his menu. There was no judgment in his gaze. Instead, a slow, amused smile curved his lips. He closed the menu with a quiet snap, leaned back in his chair, and chuckled softly. "Good," he said simply. Her eyes widened. "Good?" He nodded, turning to the waiter as if nothing at all was out of place. "2 coffees, please. Black for me, and for her or whatever she'd like." The waiter scribbled, nodded, and left. Alina blinked, confused, her face burning. "But a broken bar I just saw." Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His expression was calm, steady, almost disarming. "Then that makes it easy, doesn't it? I get to treat you." No trace of mockery, no patronizing tone, just sincerity. Her lips parted, but no words came. She felt foolish, exposed, yet strangely a broken bar safe. He smiled again, as if he could sense her unease. "You don't need to worry about the price of coffee with me. That's not why we're here." Her heart thudded. She didn't know how to respond. Most men would have shifted uncomfortably, maybe laughed it off, or worse, turned cold. But broken bar he had taken her embarrassment and dissolved it with ease. The coffees arrived quickly, steaming cups set gently between them. Alina wrapped her hands around hers, grateful for the warmth. She kept her eyes down, still uncertain. Daniel studied her quietly, his expression unreadable. To anyone else, he might have seemed simply confident. But beneath that polished exterior was a man carrying his own hidden battles Alina could not see yet. He had not come on this blind date out of boredom or casual interest. Daniel was a single father, a widower who had spent years burying himself in work, building his company, and keeping his daughter safe from the loneliness he knew too well. He had promised himself he wasn't ready for romance, not again. But something had shifted when Clara, his employee, had insisted he meet her friend. "She's real," Clara had said, "not like the women you're used to." And now, as he watched Alina sip her coffee with hesitant grace, Daniel thought Clara might have been right, because here, across from him, was a woman who had been honest in the most vulnerable way. A woman who had nothing to prove, nothing to flaunt, just the courage to admit the truth. Daniel smiled once more, this time softer. He didn't know yet where the evening would lead, but he knew one thing with certainty. He wanted to know more about the girl who had whispered, "I can't afford coffee." And in that moment, under the hum of soft jazz and the patter of rain, something rare and fragile began to take root between them, something neither of them had expected. The rain outside hadn't let up. Droplets streamed down the cafe-tilde copyright windows, tracing silver trails across the glass. The sound was steady, rhythmic, almost like nature itself was leaning in to listen. Inside, the cafe-tilde copyright had grown quieter, the evening crowd thinning, leaving only a few scattered patrons. The soft hum of jazz continued, and the glow of warm lamps softened every edge, turning the little corner they sat in into a world of its own. Alina curled her hands around the cup, savoring the warmth against her cold fingers. She hadn't expected the coffee to taste this good, or maybe it wasn't just the drink. Maybe it was the fact that someone had seen her embarrassment, her truth, and instead of dismissing her, had made her feel a broken bar safe. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady but gentle. "So," he said, breaking the silence in a voice that carried both strength and ease, "tell me something. What's one thing money can't buy that makes you happy?" The question startled her. Most men she had met wanted to talk about jobs, appearances, or see what she could offer them. But here was a man asking about something that had nothing to do with status. She thought for a moment, then spoke softly. "Peace, knowing I don't have to pretend, just being seen for who I am." Her own words surprised her, but once spoken, she couldn't take them back. She braced herself for laughter, or maybe polite disinterest. But Daniel only nodded slowly, his expression unreadable at first. Then, something shifted in his eyes. "That's rare," he murmured. "Most people spend their lives chasing things that never last." "But peace, a broken bar." He paused, exhaling as if the word itself carried weight. "Peace is everything." The way he said it, the depth in his voice, made Alina tilt her head slightly. There was something behind his words, as something unsaid. Their conversation flowed more easily after that. Daniel asked about her favorite books, and she admitted she borrowed most of hers from the library, escaping into stories because they gave her worlds where struggles turned into hope. He listened intently, leaning in as though each word mattered. He told her, in turn, that he loved classic literature but rarely had time to read anymore, and she caught a flicker of longing when he said it. They laughed, too, over silly things, like the clumsy way the waiter nearly spilled milk foam, or how Alina confessed she once tried to bake bread and ended up with something so hard she used it as a doorstop. Daniel laughed heartily, not at her but with her, and she found herself smiling more than she had in months. Time slipped by unnoticed. At one point, Daniel's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, and for the first time, Alina saw a change in his face. His eyes softened, almost tender, before he quickly silenced it. "You can answer," she said, not wanting to be a burden. He shook his head, slipping the phone back into his pocket. "It's not urgent." But the look lingered in her mind. Whoever or whatever that message was, it mattered to him. Curiosity pressed against her, but she didn't ask. She was too afraid of breaking the fragile connection between them. Instead, they drifted into stories of childhood. Alina shared little fragments of growing up with little, working since she was 16, learning how to stretch every coin. She spoke quietly, without bitterness, as if it was simply the reality she had accepted. Daniel listened, but his jaw tightened at moments, a subtle tension he didn't try to hide. "You've carried more than you should have," he said softly. Her chest tightened at the unexpected compassion. No one had ever acknowledged her struggles like that before. Most people shrugged, or offered cliché tilde copyright us about working harder. But Daniel didn't pity her. He simply a broken bar saw her, and when it was his turn, he hesitated, then spoke. "I lost my wife 5 years ago." The words landed gently, yet with the force of a truth carried too long. Alina's breath caught. She hadn't expected such vulnerability, not on a first meeting. Daniel's gaze dropped to his cup. It was sudden. Car accident. One moment she was there, the next a broken bar gone. "I was left with our daughter, Ma." She was only 3 at the time. Alina's heart clenched. That must have been a broken bar incredibly hard. It was. He didn't sugarcoat it. "Still is, some days. But she's my world now. She's the reason I keep going." His voice softened in a way Alina hadn't heard before. "Everything I do for her." There it was in the phone call, the flicker of tenderness earlier. She realized then, the powerful, composed man across from her was also a father carrying a heart cracked wide open by loss. Alina swallowed a lump in her throat. "She's lucky to have you." He looked up then, meeting her eyes with a gaze so intense it made her heart race. "I don't know about lucky. I just try my best." "But it's a broken bar lonely. You want to be strong, to protect, to lead, but sometimes, when the house is quiet." A broken bar. He trailed off, shaking his head. "Silence can be the loudest thing in the world." Her hand twitched against her cup, as if it wanted to reach across the table. She didn't, but something inside her shifted. She had expected arrogance, maybe cold politeness. Instead, she found a man who carried both strength and vulnerability in equal measure. The hours slipped by. They didn't notice when the cafe tilde copyright dimmed its lights slightly, signaling closing time was near. The waiter refilled their cups once more, perhaps out of pity or perhaps because he, too, sensed something rare was unfolding. When the bill came, Alina instinctively reached for her purse. Even though she had only admitted earlier she couldn't afford the coffee, pride pushed her hand forward. But Daniel stopped her with a gentle shake of his head. "No," he said firmly, though kindly. "Please. You've already given me more than this coffee could ever cost." She blinked. "What do you mean?" His eyes softened. "Honesty. Do you know how rare it is to sit across from someone who isn't trying to impress, who isn't pretending? From the moment you admitted you couldn't afford this, I knew you were real, and that's worth more than anything." Her throat tightened. She had no words. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. They walked together to the cafe tilde copyright door, the cool air brushing against them as they stepped outside. The streetlights cast golden halos on the wet pavement. For a moment, they stood there, uncertain. Daniel turned to her, his expression steady, but there was something unspoken in his glance, an invitation, a hope. "Alina," he said, her name rolling softly from his lips, "I'd like to see you again, if you'll let me." Her heart pounded. She could have said no, out of fear, out of disbelief that a man like him would want more than one evening with a woman like her. But instead, she found herself nodding, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I'd like that," she whispered. Daniel's answering smile was unlike the others. It wasn't the polite charm he carried so easily, but something deeper, warmer, something that promised this was only the beginning. And as they parted ways, Alina walked into the rainy night with a heart lighter than it had been in years. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know about the challenges, the doubts, the worlds they both carried. But she knew this: a single cup of coffee had turned into the possibility of something extraordinary. And sometimes, miracles began in the smallest of places, with a girl who couldn't afford coffee, and a man who saw her anyway.